Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head, and what a packed weekend of MMA we just had. Unbelievable action on both sides of the Atlantic. We had the UFC in Kansas City, great fight card over there in the States. We had OKTAGON MMA in Karlovy Vary, a wild night over in the Czech Republic. We had Cage Warriors in Dublin, and we had KSW in Poland. A little bit of something for everybody this weekend. Loads to catch up on. Let's check it all out as we relive a packed weekend on Planet MMA. All right, let's kick things off with the UFC. They went over to Kansas City, Missouri, the T-Mobile Center, playing host to UFC Fight Night. Ian Machado Garry taking on Carlos Prates in an important fight in the welterweight division. Prates on a tear, moving his way up that 170-pound division. Of course, from that famous Fighting Nerds team who seem to have a ton of momentum right now. Ian Machado Garry, a guy who has made no secret of his desire to sit at the very top of that 170-pound division. Looking to bounce back, though, after losing out and losing his undefeated record to Shavkat Rakhmonov last time out. Now, even though he lost that fight, and we talked about it on this very podcast, I think his stock still went up as a result of that fight. He took it on short notice. I think it was like 21 days or 24 days notice. He took the fight against Shavkat, which was originally due to be a title fight against Belal Muhammad, and went in there and gave Shavkat all he could handle for 3 rounds and only narrowly lost out on the scorecards. And I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that an Ian Machado Garry off a full camp could have done even better against the Kazakh warrior Shavkat Rakhmonov. So it was interesting to see how he would go this time round. But again, it's another quick turnaround. Another short notice fight for Ian Machado Garry. Again, less than 30 days notice to take on Carlos Prates in the main event in Kansas City. And once again, he delivered a good, strong performance. This time he gets the win, and I think that was really important. Performances obviously tell a story of your level and your progression as a fighter, but at the end of the day, it's wins that matter, right? So he picks up the win, unanimous decision victory. Had to weather a little bit of a storm in that last round. Carlos Prates knew that he just had to completely empty the tank and go for it in that last round, and he certainly did that. And Machado Garry was in a little bit of trouble at points in that last round, but did well enough to keep himself in the fight and make it to the final bell, where the scorecards were heavily in his favour. I think one was a 48-47, but the other two were scored 49-46, which gives you an idea of how well Ian Machado Garry did in that fight. Just looked a class above a dangerous contender in Prates. Just controlled the range really well, chose his weapons really well, mixed in a little bit of wrestling to keep Prates guessing. I think if it had just been a stand-up fight with no real hint of a takedown, I think Prates might have been able to get inside and find a home for some of his shots a little bit more. But I think just mixing those takedown attempts, and even though they weren't all successful, just keeps the opposition guessing, means that you don't know, is the shot coming? Do you have to kind of, you can't completely be relaxed in your striking, because there's always the possibility that that takedown is going to be there. And I think fight IQ is probably one of Ian Machado Garry's strongest assets. He's got the full gamut of skills. He's obviously very good at selling himself on the microphone and telling you exactly what he wants to say. But I think the fight IQ, once the fight gets underway, is really top notch, and I think he showed that for much of that fight on Saturday night in Kansas City. Now, having got the win, the question now is, where does that put him in that crowded 170-pound division? The championship picture at 170 is looking pretty busy right now. Well, he declared on the microphone that he will be the official backup fighter for UFC 315, which is on May the 10th. Main event being a title fight at welterweight between Belal Muhammad and Australia's Della Maddalena. That was then put to UFC President and CEO Dana White at the post-fight press conference, and indeed it is Ian Machado Garry who will be the backup fighter for that fight, which I believe is in Montreal, Canada on May the 10th. So we're going to see another quick turnaround potentially for Ian Machado Garry. Certainly he needs to be ready Normally backup fighters aren't called into action. Haven't seen one called in for a while for a title fight, at least. I think, who do we have? We had Renato Moicano, who wasn't a backup fight. He was just on the card. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But Machado Garry is now right there. If you get put in as a backup fighter, then you're basically being told you're next in line. You're the next guy in line. If you don't fight as the backup, that event, you're probably the next guy. But the welterweight division is absolutely rammed with talent. We pull up the UFC rankings right now, and the welterweight division is absolutely loaded, and the championship picture is pretty stacked. You've got Belal's got the belt. Number one contender officially is Sean Brady. Sean Brady, who went out there and absolutely dog-walked Leon Edwards for the entirety of the fight before he eventually gets to finish. Dominated Leon Edwards, a former champion, one of the pound for pound best. Belal Muhammad said that Brady had copied his homework. Well, if he did, he copied it and then upgraded it significantly. I thought his performance against Leon was levels above what Belal managed. Belal was impressive, no doubt about it. But Brady was next level impressive in terms of how you grade those two performances against the same opponent. Brady's number one contender. We don't know what's going to happen for him next. Number two is the still injured, I believe, Shavkat Rakhmonov, who was due to fight for the belt earlier this year and obviously did not. He's going to be back in the mix as soon as he's fit. Is he going to be Shavkat versus Brady? That might line up depending on how quickly Shavkat can be back. Maybe that's a summer fight. Maybe that's an international fight week matchup. Looks like a slam dunk co-main event kind of fight at 170 pounds. We shall see. Watch this space. Leon Edwards is still in the mix. He's still ranked third in the division. He needs a big win to get back into the mix, but he is still in that ranking spot at number 3. Number 4 is Kamaru Usman. He has just been announced he's going to take on Joachim Buckley, who is ranked 7th, having just been bumped down the list because Machado Garry has been knocked up to 6th. But Joachim Buckley taking on Kamaru Usman. Big opportunity for Buckley against one of the most respected guys in the division, a long-reigning former champion. As for Kamaru, it's a chance to really make a statement of his own and to say, hey, I'm not done yet, fellas. Let's get me back up there, in there with a shot at the title again, and we'll see if we can make it a 2-title reign career for the Nigerian Nightmare, Kamaru Usman. So there's loads going on at 170 pounds, but right now, as it stands, Ian Machado Garry, who's been bumped up to 6th in the official UFC welterweight rankings, is now going to be the backup fighter for UFC 315. As I say, Belal Muhammad versus Jack Della Maddalena. Jack Della, by the way, ranked 5th at 170 pounds. But those top 7, Buckley at 7, Garry at 6, JDM at 5, Usman at 4, Leon at 3, Shavkat at 2, Sean Brady at 1. Mix and match, however you want to do that. Any of those fights are going to be great for the division. You got Belal as champion. Hopefully, as the year goes on, we'll start to shake things up a bit. We'll get a definitive winner from that Belal versus JDM fight. Will we see Ian Machado Garry next? Yeah, I think it really depends on if they can book Brady and Shavkat possibly against each other in the summer. Then perhaps the winner of that could be in there. So who knows? Who knows? Maybe Ian Machado Garry might put his hand up to face Sean Brady if the winner of UFC 315 is going to be out for a while. Who knows? There's loads going on at 170 pounds. What we do know is after Saturday night, Ian Machado Garry is right in the thick of it. All right, Ian Machado Garry obviously was the main story coming out of UFC Fight Night in Kansas City. But over on this side of the pond, we had all sorts going on. Cage Warriors went to Dublin with a 15-fight card and produced, as Sheamus likes to say in WWE, banger after banger after banger. Unbelievably entertaining fight card from the RDS. Great show. And it was Justin Burlinson who stole the show in the main event, who came back from being that close to being finished to come back and get the victory over James Sheehan and win the Cage Warriors welterweight title. An unbelievable performance from Justin Burlinson, and the way that fight panned out kind of has sort of echoes of how his life and career has gone over the last couple of years, dealing with a lot of injuries, being diagnosed with testicular cancer, fighting through both of those, getting fit again, getting healthy again, coming back to Cage Warriors, getting an emotional win last year to put himself in contention for the title. Takes on James Sheehan in the main event in Dublin on enemy territory, gets dropped badly in the second round. And credit to referee Rich Mitchell here, because one of our most experienced, respected referees, for good reason. I think a less experienced referee might have gotten a little overexcited and might have dived in and stopped that fight quite quickly after seeing Burlinson get dropped. Credit to Rich, kept his distance, had a look, made sure that Burlinson was still moving in a way that suggested he was trying to defend himself. And Burlinson did really well insofar as whenever Mitchell gave him an instruction to improve his position or to defend himself, Burlinson answered that with movement and with some sort of defensive technique. That kept him in the fight. Sheehan, meanwhile, was pouring on the pressure, trying to finish him with strikes, then switched to sort of grappling, and at that point nearly got finished himself. An absolutely horrible looking armbar that Burlinson managed to get and talked Sheehan's arm at the elbow at completely the wrong direction. It was one of those that makes you sort of wince and walk away from the TV. Somehow Sheehan managed to shake that off and sort of just carried on his dominance at top position, trying to finish the fight. Burlinson is showing all the fighting heart that you could ever wish to see from a title challenger. Gets through the round. In fact, towards the end of the round, even he is now starting to throw heavy leather and is connecting with some big shots of his own. There was a lot going on in that round. It was a crazy, mad round. And then round 3, lots of back and forth. Burlinson really fighting he needed to get the respect of Sheehan after being dropped in round 2. He had to really push back and dig his heels in round 3, and he did that. And there were a couple of little glimpses in that third round of what was to come later in the fight as he come close to locking up the guillotine choke, I think on 2 separate occasions when they were in the clinch up against the cage. And by the end of the third round, as it turned out, and we didn't know this until Paul Redman mentioned it at the end of the fight on commentary, James Sheehan at some point in the third round had broken his jaw. So Burlinson had obviously landed something pretty substantial during that third round. Broke James Sheehan's jaw, and then in round 4, when they're up against the fence again, this time Burlinson gets the guillotine choke on again, and the tap came pretty quickly, which you don't normally get a really quick tap from a choke. You can get a quick tap when you've got a broken jaw and all the torque is on that jaw. So I expect that's what it was that caused the tap to come as quickly as it did. Obviously, crushing defeat for James Sheehan, who has looked superb in that Cage Warriors welterweight division, and I think was hoping that a win over Burlinson would put him in line for Contender Series or maybe even the UFC. The momentum seemed to be with him, but instead it was Burlinson who snatched that championship away with an incredible come-from-behind performance, and now maybe he could get himself a second opportunity in the Contender Series. So let's see what happens. But amazing performance from Justin Burlinson. But do not worry yourself if you're a James Sheehan fan. That man's coming back, and I fully expect him to be holding championship gold in Cage Warriors again, unless he gets his call up to the big leagues before he gets a chance to do so. But great fight between 2 really talented fighters, and a great way to end a packed night of fights. Word for the co-main event: James Webb, veteran of the UK MMA scene, former Cage Warriors middleweight champion, lost the title fight to Mick Stanton a year or 2 ago. Then decided to move up to 205 pounds and has gone 3-0 at 205. And to be honest, I think he's found his sweet spot. I don't think he's ever looked any better. He was a dominant champion at middleweight, but at 205 pounds, having really filled himself out. He's an absolute tank of a man at 205. Looks really, really good, and defended his belt on Saturday against John Allen. Second round TKO, typical James Webb sort of performance, forcing his opponent to the mat, establishing top position, posturing up, and just bludgeoning the guy with some heavy ground and pound until the referee says, "It's time to stop, James. You've done your job." And James Webb retains that Cage Warriors light heavyweight title, which he captured last time out with victory over Andy Clamp. Could a Contender Series appearance be in the mix for James Webb? It's a tough one. Looking at his age, he's one of the more senior champions in Cage Warriors for sure. And as talented and as strong and as good as James Webb is, he has a fighting style that, let's be honest, probably isn't going to endear him massively to Dana White. Dana White wants people to be throwing crazy stuff, standing, striking, submission, like crazy submissions, whereas James will stand and throw with anybody. But his bread and butter is getting people to the mat and just smashing them. So proper old school Mark Coleman stuff, you know? So I don't know. I think he deserves a go. I certainly think he deserves a go. Whether he'll get that, we'll have to wait and see. I'd love to see it for him. I think it would be certainly deserved for the career that he's had, giving him a chance relatively late in his career potentially to get a crack at the big leagues in the UFC. I think that would be certainly deserved for him, and we'll see what happens. But if it isn't, he is one of the dominant forces in Cage Warriors right now. Great performance on Saturday from James Webb, and a great performance as well from Justin Burlinson, your two Cage Warriors champions, heading out of Cage Warriors 188 in Dublin. Cage Warriors in Dublin was a fantastic night, and so was Octagon 70 in Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic. Absolutely phenomenal card of fights. Everywhere you turn, there was drama. Everywhere you turn, there were finishes, and it turned out to be a huge night in the middleweight division. The Tipsport Game Changer tournament rolling on with the second set of 4 opening round bouts, determining the final set of fighters to go into the quarterfinals of the Tipsport Game Changer, the €1 million middleweight tournament. The main event saw a debutant, KSW veteran, but Octagon MMA debutant, Dominic Humberger Dominic Humberger, as he corrected the pronunciation during the press conference. He got the big win in the main event against an Octagon fan favourite, Samuel Krzysztof Pirat, as he's known over there, the Pirate. I think was fancied to do quite well in this tournament. Got stopped in the second round with strikes. Dominic Humberger getting the job done. He progresses to the quarterfinals of the Tipsport Game Changer. Vlasto Chepo, he got a first round knockout over Erhan Kartal to book his spot in the quarterfinals. Krzysztof Jotko, remember him? UFC veteran from Poland. Very tricky fighting style, loves to stick and move, likes to stand the outside, keep out the way. Did what we're used to seeing. Managed to avoid a lot of problems with Ian Serdu, the Octagon welterweight champion, who had stepped up in weight to try and have some glory at 185 pounds. Unfortunately, his attempt to win in the tournament finished after just one fight. Krzysztof Jotko, a little bit too clever for him, a little bit too good for him in Karlovy Vary. And Piotr Wawrzyniak, the former interim middleweight champion of Octagon MMA, getting the job done. First round knockout of Marek Mazuch to get himself into the quarterfinals of the Tipsport Game Changer. We also had the draw for the Tipsport Game Changer. We'll bring up the results for that now. We did the live draw in Karlovy Vary at a press conference after the event, where they first drew numbers to determine the order, and then one at a time in order they placed themselves in the brackets. If you're familiar with the old K1 style tournament and the way they used to do the draw for that, exactly the same. And it was kind of interesting. We had Kerim Engizek was unavailable for the event. His manager turned up, popped himself on the left-hand side of the bracket there, having drawn number 1 in the draw. England's Mick Stanton, former Cage Warriors champion, drew number 2 and plonked himself right next to Enger's ex-manager. He will take on the Octagon MMA middleweight champion in the quarterfinals of the Tit Sport Game Changer. Is that wise, or is that absolutely the gangster move from Mick Stanton? I think he takes the view that he's got to beat the best if he's going to win the tournament. Let's get the champion out of the way now. So he takes on the champ, Kerim Engizek, in the second round of the Tip Sport Game Changer, the quarterfinals. Also set for action, David Humberger, who won the main event, taking on South Africa's Mark Hume. Mati Peñas will take on Wawrzyniak, who won on Saturday night. And Vlasto Chepo will take on Krzysztof Jotko. We're in a situation where Wawrzyniak had the option of choosing a fight between Peñas or Jotko, and decided that Poland versus Poland, the quarterfinals was a little too early in the tournament for some Poland on Poland crime. So he said, we'll face off in the semi instead. Those two both win their fights. They will face off in the tournament semi-final. €1 million up for grabs in the Tit Sport Game Changer tournament. And that event at Karlovy Vary was insane. One of the best ones we've seen in terms of just sheer action, craziness, finishes, bit of everything going on in the arena at a new venue and a new town for Octagon MMA, who continuing to play to pack houses. I mean, their shows are must-see TV every time they're on. So looking forward to seeing how that tournament pans out, and can Mick Stanton get past the champion? We will find out a little bit later this year. They will assign those fights to event dates and locations in the coming weeks. But for now, that's what we know on the Tit Sport Game Changer. Humberger versus Hulm, Engizek versus Stanton, Peñas versus Wawrzyniak, and Chepo versus Jotko. We had one more big MMA event taking place in continental Europe this weekend. KSW 105, coming live from Gliwice in Poland, saw what could best be described as a battle of the giants, clash of the titans, whatever you want to call it. It was one of those fights that you just had to watch through, back in the day, right? Pride Fighting Championships used to specialize in this, the freak show fights, right? And that really sort of means fighters that are either much bigger or they don't come from a usual martial arts background or whatever it is. Just fights that on paper and visually look wild matchups. And this is absolutely the closest thing that we've seen in a while in what I would call a reputable promotion. We had Mariusz Pudzianowski, the 5-time world's strongest man from Poland, who has parlayed that strongman career into mixed martial arts and has had, I think, something like 28 fights in his career, and has done very, very well for himself and has become an absolute legend on top of his strongman achievements, a legend in MMA circles in Poland. He took on Eddie Hall. Eddie Hall himself, a former world's strongest man and an absolute tank of a human being, making his first ever professional sanctioned mixed martial arts fight. And he took on Pudzianowski, and the experience difference is enormous. Like 28 fights versus 1, 28 or 29 fights versus 1. He's just insane. But the size difference was huge. I think Pudzianowski weighed in at 267, which is 1 pound over the usual heavyweight limit. And Eddie Hall was upwards of 330 pounds. I think 336, I think it was, for the fight. And we saw the difference in size and strength. He literally threw Pudzianowski across the cage like a rag doll. It was remarkable. Finishes him with strikes. 30 seconds. Eddie Hall's first fight. Defeats Pudzianowski in 30 seconds by TKO. Controversy, though. Bit of controversy. Shots to the back of the head while they were standing. Shots to the back of the head while Puds was on the ground and he was hammer fisting him. He was moving around. I will put it down to overzealousness and excitement. He's never fought professional MMA before. His knowledge of position and the blood to the head and all the rest of it in that sort of scenario, you just rain down the punches until the ref says stop. The knowledge of when he was throwing fouls and when he wasn't throwing fouls wasn't quite there. And the referee was pretty lenient, just let it go pretty much. And I'm not saying that was the reason why he won the fight. He was winning the fight anyway. He was going to win the fight anyway, the way it was going. But yeah, it was some pretty heavy shots to the back of the head from a 330 plus pound man. I'm sure Mariusz Pudzianowski needed a few aspirin by the time he got back to the locker room. But fingers crossed, all is well with Mariusz. Mariusz said these things happen. It's one of those things. He hit me with some shots on the back of the head, but it is what it is. Eddie Hall has since apologised, offered an apology, and said, he doesn't condone hitting people on the back of the head, and he wouldn't want that to happen to him. And I think he's regretful that it happened in the white hot heat of a big MMA fight and his very first one. But that was a huge win. The question now is, what do they do with Eddie Hall next? What can they do with Eddie Hall next? Who can they find to step into the cage with a 330-pound man who can finish you with one swing of his hand? It's a difficult one, but if it's a one-off, it was a good one-off. It was 30 seconds of absolute chaos, and it certainly generated some eyeballs on the KSW product, which doesn't need any problem getting eyeballs on it in Poland. It's a little bit harder to get to see over here in the UK. I think you've got to get Viaplay to get it. Not many people have Viaplay over here. You can get it pay-per-view on ksw.tv. But again, pay-per-view is not something that MMA fans in the UK tend to spend a lot of money on. So it's a little bit buried, which is a shame. But hopefully, as things progress, these fights will become a little bit more visible. OKTAGON are currently behind a paywall over here as well. They've been on DAZN. I don't think they're on DAZN at the moment. I think their deal has expired. So we'll see what happens with them as well. They were making some real strides in terms of popularity. I know they're focusing very much on the German market, understandably, and they've done a huge deal with RTL in Germany, which really kicks them into the mainstream over there. So they're doing big things over there. I hope that they don't forget us guys over here in the UK, and they can get some sort of TV deal. I mean, DAZN was ideal. It is a combat sports streamer, basically, DAZN at this point. So it was a good home for it. But we shall see. We shall see what happens. But loads of action this weekend. Obviously, we had Eubank Jr. versus Benn as well, and what an occasion that was. What an occasion Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn was. And with all of the hype, with all of the build-up, you almost felt that it can't live up to that. It can't live up to the billing. It can't live up to the hype. It did. It really did. The occasion was huge. Chris Eubank Sr. turning up just an hour or two before the fight was just absolute cinema, as the kids like to say on social media. It was great. The fight was good. Excuse me. The fight was good, and Eubank deservedly got the decision win. It was a close fight. It was a well-contested fight. Eubank, I think, was probably good to win it by maybe 2-3 rounds. I think the scorecards gave it to him by 4. It felt closer than that, but not scoring it round to round. It's hard to say. There could be a lot of very close rounds, but if they all get scored one way, the score looks lopsided, even though every round was close. So that's why I'm always hesitant to look at scores, final totals and go, whoa, what's going on there? Because, you can have 12 really closely contested rounds, but you can have that same one fighter edging all 12 of them. And then you get a shutout on the scorecards, even though it's super close. So 116, 112, I think the scores were. And but it sounds like we might get a rematch. All I hope is that it is done responsibly with regards to the weight. I wasn't a fan of the whole rehydration clause thing. I wasn't a fan of how Chris Eubank Jr. looked on the scale. The fact they took $500,000 off him for missing by 5 ounces seems incredibly harsh. But when you've got that much bad blood simmering between the two camps, when a line is drawn, they're not going to give you much of a concession. So unfortunately, that bad blood and the back and forth, and maybe the way Eubank Jr. was dealing with Eddie Hearn in press conferences in the lead up to the fight, maybe that cost him $500,000 as much as it did him missing the weight. Because I think if the mutual respect is there and the spirit of cooperation and sportsmanship is there, without all that aggro, which obviously sold the fight. Let's not kid ourselves. But if that personal aggro between Eddie Hearn and Chris Eubank Jr. wasn't there, maybe that $500,000 might not have changed hands. I don't know. I think Conor Benn, I think, got that $500,000. So, he's done all right out of it. But in the end, it was Chris Eubank Jr. who got the win. And just like his dad did against Nigel Benn in their first fight in 1990, was it? 1991? Which was an absolutely epic fight. And the build up to that was fantastic as well. It was the Eubank family who are left celebrating. Will we see a rematch? I hope we do. Because it was just such a huge occasion for British boxing. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium looked incredible. The staging in the event was brilliant. And it was a great night for British boxing. And fingers crossed we get to see more nights like that moving forward, because I think over here in the UK and certainly in England, we do boxing better than anywhere in the world. Yes, Vegas used to be the fight capital. Yes, Riyadh has all the money. And yes, Mexico produces some of the most incredible fighters and fighting spirit. But if you want to see an event, if you want to see a boxing event done well at the highest level, come to one of the big shows in the UK. They are the best boxing events in the world, and I will stand by that. Best atmosphere, best arenas, the stadium shows are incredible, and the fights generally deliver. So, hats off to everybody involved. Who doesn't want to see a rematch? Who doesn't want to see a rematch? We'll see what happens a little bit further down the line with Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. All right, that's all we've got time for on the RDX Sports Podcast for this particular episode. We've got loads of MMA coming down the line this weekend, but this show, we just look back at an absolutely huge weekend of combat sports. Hope you enjoyed the fights that we've just had. Get yourself ready. We've got a whole lot more coming later this weekend. And if we can squeeze in some time before the end of the week, we might jump on and do another RDX Sports pod just to set the table for the coming weekend. Thanks so much for checking us out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. That's the best way to make sure you never miss an episode of the RDX Sports Podcast. You can follow RDX on the socials. We're on X at RDX Sports. We're on Instagram at RDX_sports. And if you want to follow me, you can do so. You're more than welcome. Hit me a follow on all social platforms. I'm at Simon Head Sport. That's all we've got for you on the episode this week. Enjoy the rest of the week. The sun here is absolutely beautiful. I don't quite know where it's come from. Enjoy it while it's here. It could all be gone by next week. And fingers crossed, we've got another packed weekend of fantastic combat sports coming our way. But until next time, I'll speak to you soon.